I didn't want to own anything, really. It was like a long-running joke. I never owned a car. I never owned a house, except for that apartment for 2 years. I never owned any real estate. And everything I did was renting. That was my sense of security.
But this is my house, Mommy. The one I asked Mr. Kringle for. It is. I know it is.
Welcome to The Pursuit of Home, coming to you from New York City. This is real people buying real estate and their unique journey to get there. We share the tips, tricks, and frameworks to help you navigate the bumps in the road that you won't see on reality TV or social media, and which no one has talked about until now.
Welcome back to The Pursuit of Home. I'm Scott Harris, your host. This was recorded a long time ago. We were trying to figure out what The Pursuit of Home was all about as a podcast. It's a real person buying real estate. In this case, it's Steve Herz, who's a successful New York City businessman. He is starting where maybe many of you are, as far as possible as you can get from buying a home. He didn't want to buy one. He did not want to buy a house. And there's a lot to learn from that mindset, that attitude. He and his wife struggled with the idea of buying a home. I'm going to let them talk all about it. I have so many questions for them. Why would you never want to own a house? What do you think is going to happen? And more importantly, how does that attitude keep you from doing what you want to do, not just with home ownership, but in general? So we're going to dive into this. It's a great story. It's a great success story, how he ends up. So enjoy it, and we'll see you on the other side.
So I moved to New York in 1991, lived in a two-bedroom apartment with a roommate for quite some time. I was offered that apartment, and they wanted to sell it to me for, I think it was $170,000. Someone bought it, and then they evicted me. I didn't think it was legal, but the guy had some clause, I guess, in the contract that he bought with the owner and said he could get rid of me. Eventually left, and I needed a place to live, and I happened to run into this woman I knew, and she said that she had a friend who was selling this apartment right down the street on 72nd. I went over there and I bought it. I paid $160,000 for it. And I thought, this is crazy. This thing I'll never get my money out. Yeah. And I kind of had a bad taste in my mouth at that point for rentals, because I thought, okay, here I could be just evicted on a minute's notice. And I lived in that apartment for 2 years. I decided to sell it. The market was way up. And I thought, okay, this is crazy what's happening to real estate. This apartment was now worth $275,000. You're going to see a pattern that I've been wrong about real estate for 30 straight years. In part, I wanted to be there because it was a rental building and they couldn't evict me, as long as I paid the rent. So I was walking there. It was a Tuesday morning, and that's literally when 9/11 happened. Here I had $100,000 of profit from the sale that paid for the rent for 3 to 4 years.
During the time as renter, did you want to buy?
Yeah, we did talk about it, I guess, at some point, especially when we had our second kid. We looked at apartments. We did actually look at some apartments, and we bid on one, and we lost. I just thought it was insanely expensive to put that much of your money into an apartment at the time, and I'm a little anxious about money. I also didn't think I was fully committed to New York City. I really have never been fully committed to New York. I grew up on Long Island. I had a backyard as a kid, basketball court, typical suburban existence. Raquel grew up in the city, but I always, I suppose, harbored these fantasies about raising my kids with a backyard and on a cul-de-sac or something like that.
Most people do talk about that. Major cities, there's the conversation, do I want to live in the city or do I live in the suburbs? Usually that conversation happens before people get married.
We talked about it, and I remember there's a funny story. I guess I didn't realize until we got married how allergic Raquel is to anything outside of Manhattan, pretty much anything outside of the Upper West Side, anything outside of like a 15-block radius from around where she was raised. I talked about going to look at a house in Westchester. I have a brother in Long Island, in Port Washington. And she was like, I can't do it. Please don't make me move to the suburbs. I just don't want to live in the suburbs. And so we kind of agreed to look in Brooklyn. That was kind of our compromise. So we took a drive one Sunday, and we parked the car on the street in front of this Barnes & Noble. We got out of the car, and Raquel had a full-on panic attack. Please don't make me live in Brooklyn. And we got right back in the car and we drove back to Manhattan. And I think other than a couple of weddings and maybe a couple of dinners, we really have never been back to Brooklyn.
So you never, really, like, abort mission.
Either I am going to probably kill my wife because she'll she'll die of asphyxiation, self-asphyxiate, or we're going back and we're living in the city for the rest of our lives. And that kind of made it easy.
Right. So the choice is really rent or own in the 15 block area that worked for her. Is it just that time passes? Like, did the conversation come up again about trying to buy?
For me, it just became a question of dollars and cents. And to own something similar on a cash flow basis would be almost double what we were paying. I mean, Raquel saw it and sees it very differently, but I'm not really attached to things like that. We were happy. I mean, we were happy there for the most part. And then that took us right into the beginning of COVID. And then everything kind of changed.
All right. So on one hand, you're like, renting is so much cheaper. Buying felt in some ways like a sucker's game or something, right?
To me, it did.
At some point in the midst of your, very rational thinking about, renting versus owning in the city, you bought something outside of the city. So talk to me about that.
We decided to do like a summer rental in Southampton. And so we rented the house. So we rented it with this other family. We did that for like 4 years. Then they decided to buy a house. So we didn't have anyone to rent with anymore, and I wasn't going to pay double whatever we were paying. Raquel said, oh, let's go look at houses. I said, I don't want to buy a house. This is crazy. She said, it'd be a great investment. Don't even own anything. Let's own something. It's the diversification of assets. You've heard all the stories.
So she's positioning the buying of the house in language that you respond to.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't want to own anything, really. It was like a long-running joke. I never owned a car. I never owned a house, except for that apartment for 2 years. I never owned any real estate. Everything I did was renting. I had no debt. That was important to me. Like I said, I have this business. Things could go bad. That was my sense of security.
Which is the opposite of what so many people would see as security, right? Like, in your case, wanting to have nothing, it's kind of like, I want to be able to drop everything in my life and leave in 30 seconds, right? That freedom felt like security to you?
Yeah, it probably did. That's probably what it was. This, I don't like to be caged in, I'm not really good at dealing with authority. That's why I haven't had a boss in 27 years. We ended up looking at 2 houses, and it was crazy. We walked into the second house, and immediately, without even a second thought, and I never, ever felt this way in looking at apartments in New York, it was like, okay, this is, at least for me, in my price range, this is my dream house. This is amazing. I can't believe this house is being offered at this price. It was literally the best decision we've made, I think.
You go from being allergic. You're like, I want to have the freedom. I want to be able to just have the cash on hand, and I never want to feel like constrained by a bank. Did you borrow money or did you buy it?
No, we borrowed money, and that was another thing. It was crazy. I got a 30-year mortgage at like 2% or 2.25%, 2.5%, whatever. It was incredibly cheap money. And so, between that low mortgage and Southampton has incredibly low taxes, it was cheaper than renting.
Did Raquel point out those things too, or was she just making the case about the diversification?
Once we saw the house, I didn't really have to be convinced at that point. I mean, we made a bid right away, and we came to a deal with the owners like within a day.
So I just want to point out that the timeline of your real estate purchases. You saw one place and bought it and sold it.
That's true.
You've seen 2 places now, although you did say you saw a few apartments
in the city, yeah.
And then you didn't even see one in Brooklyn. You aborted mission there.
Exactly.
So this is a 2-shot, 2 properties bought in the Hamptons.
It gets better, as you'll see in a minute. Oh, by the way, there was one deal, though, that we made, which I've stuck to, and Raquel has too. I said, if you want to buy this house, we'll buy it. But I want to have nothing to do with it. I'm not going to deal with any of the garbage collection, the upkeep on the house, anything. I'm not going to, you're going to take care of all the billing, the heating oils, you're going to replace that. And she has done everything. I haven't had, she hired the gardener, all that stuff.
But very clear communication. This is like, I have friends who've said, okay, to kids, you want this dog? You walk it every single time. And if you don't take care, if you don't do it, we're going to sell it. Or, in this case, like a dog, we're going to give it to the pound or something.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
And that she was like, yes, I'm all in. And she's committed to that, stuck to that.
She has stuck to it, every little aspect of it.
Are there other things in your life that you take, that you're like, this is me? This is like, do you divide things up in the rest of your life like that too?
Yeah, I would say we have the prototypical 1950s marriage. I work, I try to earn a living, and she does everything else. She plans everything. So some of my friends make fun of me because I don't know what's going on in my own life most of the time. We'll go on a vacation, and I won't know where we're going until the day before or any of the plans. It works.
You're in the Hamptons. It's COVID. You and Raquel and I have a conversation. We spend maybe an hour, and then I just ask a simple question I talk to buyers about all the time, like, what does home mean to you? right? And that opened up like a whole conversation. I talked to you maybe 2 months later, no joke. It might have been less than 2 months later. Talk about what happened between that conversation and Scott, you're not going to believe what happened.
It was 2021 at this point, and our landlord, he had told us when we first moved into the apartment that we could live there for the rest of our lives if we wanted. He was never selling it. Maybe in 30 years he'd give it to his kids, but don't worry, you can stay there as long as you want. I guess during COVID, he said that his business had taken some kind of a reverse and he really needed the money out of the apartment and he wanted to sell it to us. We'd lived there. It was a great place to rent, but it wasn't something I'd ever want to own. I didn't love the use of the space. I also thought the price was too high. We said we didn't want to buy it, and he said, well, I'm going to have to kick you out then in 6 months because that's when your lease runs out. And I said, I understood. He ended up letting us stay through the summer, as I recall. Raquel and I went on some vacation with some friends to, I never remember whether it was Anguilla or Antigua, one of those islands. I've only been to one of them, but I got a text out of the blue from this number I didn't recognize, and it said, hey, I know your wife liked this building. There's an apartment that's not even on the market yet, and this one I think would be really good for you guys. So I wrote back, who is this? And she wrote, it's Joanna. I hadn't talked to Joanna in 3 years. And one of the buildings we had thought about moving into, either renting or if we were going to buy, was this building because it had a lot of the same amenities as the Bromley. And now again, I need a place to live because this guy's kicking me out. I went over there in the morning and I thought, okay, it's a really nice apartment. Seemed like a decent price. And I remember I took video for Raquel and I said to Joanna, I said, if Raquel likes it, I'm going to make an offer. We'd been negotiating for an extension. And so we came to a deal and he was like, are you going to sign this lease or not? And that's when I looked at the apartment and I said, but I need an answer tonight. I can't keep this guy going anymore. Raquel went over, looked at it, liked it. We made a bid. We came to an agreement within like 30 minutes. And I told the guy we're moving out and we ended up buying this apartment in the Boulevard. Crazy enough.
I have to ask, in the rest of your life, here's someone who's like, the numbers don't work. You analyze, you do cash flow analysis. All these things that you're talking about are completely counter to what you're saying here. Are there other decisions that you make in your life that are so, I don't want to say it's impulsive.
I happen to be a very impulsive person and very impatient in some aspects of my life, like, whether it's I can't stand online, that kind of thing. But professionally, I'm incredibly patient. Like I can wait years and years and years for the right situation to develop. And my business has been incredibly slow growing and stable. Same clients for 25, 30 years. Some of them. The employee base hasn't really changed at all. I don't know. Sometimes you just got to trust your gut, I guess. To me, this wasn't that big of a decision because, again, what were my choices at this point? I could go back to this rental. He was raising the rent. Felt like kind of a ripoff. Or I could buy this apartment. Again, interest rates were dirt cheap. I did look at what my monthly outlay was going to be, and it was going to be actually less to go own this apartment in the Boulevard than it would be to extend the lease.
You kept the variables relatively small. You're comparing rent. You had enough cash available to do the down payment.
And it wasn't a ton of down payment because, again, you could just borrow 90% of the money at 2.25%.
Right. So you couldn't find a reason to say no.
Except the one thing the mistake I made, which I literally looked at the apartment for 5 minutes. Probably shouldn't have done what I did. As we'll see, I ended up regretting it quickly.
Because you didn't like the apartment?
Correct.
Okay, so you went in, you're like...
We made the deal in probably February or March. It took forever to get to the closing. And finally, we closed in probably May or June. I never went back to the apartment. Never went in there.
The whole time?
Exactly. I thought the apartment was perfect. They had renovated some stuff, but she wanted to change like certain things, whatever. I said, all right, do it, whatever you want to do. So I never went back to the apartment. Then we went back in September. And I walked in and I just looked at Raquel and I said, I don't really love this place. I don't think I really want to move in here. Something obviously crazy, sad, crazy in terms of how it affects the whole story is that now we own the apartment, and a week later, Raquel's mom died. She had been very sick. Like I said, they owned this apartment for 60 years, raised in this apartment, really nice place, but it was something that needed to be completely renovated. And we were sitting Shiva, and I was out they had like an outdoor space, and I said to Raquel, this is a really nice apartment. I think we should buy this apartment. And she said, are you insane?
So wait, so for people who, those of you out there who don't know what sitting Shiva, you're mourning. It's a Jewish ritual of mourning. So you're in her childhood apartment, having people come to visit, and you're just talking about her mom.
This is like after everyone left, I was sitting outside with her brother and her, and
like at the end of a long day.
Yeah, at the end of the day, and to be honest, I was smoking a cigar, which I like, and just really enjoying the view.
What time of year is this? This is
September.
the early, so it's a beautiful time of year.
Beautiful night, yeah. And we were just reminiscing about her mom, and I said we should buy this apartment. And Raquel has two brothers, and so we would have to have paid for 2/3 of it. And of course, I did the math again. And when you do the math, it literally worked out almost to the dollar. It was crazy that 2/3 of that apartment, exact same as the 100% of the apartment we just literally bought.
Because it's a nicer building.
It's a nicer building, right? Whatever. So,
and he also had outdoor space, which is
which
exciting.
I really wanted. And at this point, also something kind of, I guess, happened for me, which was I finally gave in to the idea that I'm going to be living in New York City. Now here I am, 56 years old, been here for 31 years, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to commit to New York. I'm ready to make that commitment. So that was a big move mentally. That was not impulsive, by the way.
Did it feel like, was it like, like I'm a New Yorker? Finally?
Yeah,
like
it did.
You no longer have, did you get married
Yeah,
later?
I got married at 40.
So
there's
like,
a pattern
this is
here.
It's a pattern. Okay. So you're in New York. You've had one foot out the door mentally. You're still holding on to this dream, even though your wife has made it clear as a bell that she can't even go to Brooklyn,
Exactly.
much less the suburbs.
Or by the way, even like Chelsea.
Okay. I'm putting both feet here in New York. How did it feel?
It felt a little bit like Stockholm Syndrome, because even now there's sometimes when I walk down the street and it's dirty or it's like, it's crowded.
Explain to me the element of Stockholm
Well,
Syndrome.
I feel like New York City is my captor in the sense it's like you're falling in love. You end up, falling in love with your captor.
Right. I just want to make sure I was understanding. This is as opposed to Clara Barton, right? Where you like fall in love with the patient. This is you fall in love with
I've
your
always
captor.
had a love-hate relationship with New York. I'm very thankful for New York because I think it has a certain energy. Raquel always says, if we had moved to the suburbs, you would have ran. It would have been you who dragged us back to the city in like 5 days. I'm an adrenaline junkie. I love excitement. I like having people around. So this is the perfect city for me. I just probably didn't want to admit it because also your identity is tied up into like your childhood. Like I said, I was born Long Island, idyllic, whatever. We had parks around, etc.
You didn't want to admit that you like this dirty, crazy place full of insane
and I guess
people?
I felt bad. Like, like I said, I had a paper route, I had a bicycle, we had a basketball court in the backyard. Like, I guess I wanted to give my kids that same upbringing, but that wasn't happening. I kind of finally realized that after a while, after 16 years of marriage. Okay, I'm ready to commit.
In parallel, you also realized, we kind of dropped the thread that you hate, or I don't want to say you hate, you really realized you didn't like this apartment that you already own. So you have an apartment in a house in the Hamptons. You have this apartment you closed on with the super low rate, and it's mostly renovated, even if Raquel's going to fix it up. Okay, I'm committed to New York. I'm $1 zillion longer in real estate than I expected to be at this point in my life. So are you having a heart attack when you buy and then sell right away? It's not guaranteed that you're going to pull like a rabbit out of a hat like you did when you were, in your 20s and you bought an apartment and sold it 2 years later and made 60, 70%.
Right, but we got lucky. Again, what ended up happening is we kind of bought it at a pretty low point because we went to contract in February or March, right?
When COVID, at the kind of COVID low in this market.
Exactly. And so which
was different than everywhere else.
We got a really good deal on the apartment. No one else wanted to buy in Manhattan. And we call back Joanna. Hey, by the way, that apartment we just closed on, we don't want it anymore. Can you sell it? And she thought we were kidding, like a normal person would. Are you guys sick? Is everything okay? Are you leaving the city? No, we just don't want it. And luckily, in those 6 months, the market went up probably 10%. So we broke even. I mean, we actually made money on the apartment, but after transaction costs, we ended up breaking even, which to me is a miracle.
It is a miracle. It is nothing short of a miracle. You're just a
luckiest person on the face of the earth when it comes to real estate. For a guy who always complains about real estate.
For somebody who is allergic to real estate, who doesn't want to do it at all.
The Hamptons house turned out to be a great investment too, even though that's not why we did it. There's an expression that there's no greater zealot than a recent convert, right? I feel like I've become a zealot for real estate ownership because it does give you a sense of grounding in where you are. I think there's something to be said for commitment. And I just have to get a little plug in here for my beloved Michigan Wolverines, if you don't mind. Jim Harbaugh, the football coach, he struggled up until 2 years ago, and he really had all this wanderlust to go back to the NFL, and he was rejected by the Minnesota Vikings, and he came back to Michigan, and he's been incredibly successful going to the college football championship playoff. And I think it's because he finally got committed to where he was. There's this guy, Scott O'Neill, who used to run the Sixers, and he wrote this book that I read called Be Where Your Feet Are, and it's really great advice. And I think that living with one foot out the door is probably something, if I had to go back and relive my life, that's one thing I wouldn't do. I'd plant both feet exactly where I was at that time.
And since you did it, since you felt that like change, where has it shown up in the rest of your life? You have a successful business. Has it changed the way you think about growing the business?
Yes, it has. After the business that we sold, I had to rebuild my legacy business, and I was only left with 2 of my legacy employees from, all those 25 years, and I had to hire new people. And I had a choice at that point. I could stay very small, and we had a really nice business with just 3 of us. Maybe we'd hire an assistant, or we could kind of grow again. And I think it all sort of dovetailed exactly with the timing of buying this apartment and feeling committed to New York. And it was kind of for me, it was a personal rebirth in a way. And so I've hired, 3 or 4 new people in just the last 12 months. And there's a tremendous commitment to the company. And I feel very similarly right now at 56 that I did at 30 when I started the company. And it's been great. Honestly, it's been, the last year of my life has been amazing. And I think it has a lot to do with that sense of commitment and knowing that you're building on something that hopefully will be bigger than me. I had no idea that these were the things I was thinking or feeling. So I appreciate you dragging it out of me.
I want to thank Steve Herz for sharing his story. Perhaps you noticed how often he referenced running numbers all the time to justify why he wasn't going to make a purchase. And then, under the pressure of his friend not being able to rent with him in the summer, or the landlord selling the apartment from him, from under him, then he had to rush out and make a decision, and he would find something that he really liked, whether it was in the Hamptons or in the city. All of his justification of the numbers went right out the window, and then it would come right back after he had bought. He would justify why it was a good purchase. And in a way that really actually backfired on the first purchase in Manhattan, because he realized he hated the apartment, and he had, even though all the numbers worked and he got a low mortgage rate, he still hated the apartment. And as an aside, he got really, really lucky when it was time to sell that, not time to sell it, when he decided to sell it and buy his in-laws apartment. In any other place, especially in New York, it could cost between 5 and 10% of the sale price to sell your house. So to try to sell it immediately after you just bought it, the planets have to line up pretty luckily to help you break even. The bigger piece of this was the commitment. It seemed like Steve was more allergic to his commitment to New York City than to anything else. And he told us that he had this idea of raising his kids in the suburbs, even though he knew in his heart that neither he nor his wife wanted to live there. And I think about those fantasies and how those hold us back in some way, and the excuses that we find to justify our holding back. It's not the money, and it's not about the mortgage rates. It's something much bigger.
Well, that was our episode. If you like what you hear, make sure to review it and rate it, and most importantly, share it with your friends and your family and people on the street who are trying to buy real estate. We're trying to bring you real people buying real estate. And between us and the More Network at Brown Harris Stevens, there's a lot to learn.